am going to say this softly first, because the truth doesn't need to shout 30 days ago. I was the woman people looked through instead of at. The one whose messages got delayed replies, whose presence was polite but forgettable. And then something shifted so violently that now rooms recalibrate when I walk in. Conversations lean toward me without effort. Men remember my name without being reminded. And women ask what changed in my eyes before they ask anything else. Because here's the part no one tells you. Becoming impossible to ignore isn't about doing more. It's about removing everything that taught the world to overlook you. And I know that sounds almost too simple, which is exactly why most women never do it. Because simplicity threatens a culture that profits from keeping you busy, insecure, and endlessly self-improving instead of self-possessed. And I need you to stay with me right now, because if you've ever felt like you're doing everything right and still not being chosen, still not being prioritized, still not being desired at the depth you know you deserve, this isn't because you're lacking. It's because you've been leaking power in invisible ways. Ways so normalized they feel like kindness, ambition, humility, or patience, when in reality, they are quiet forms of self-erasure. And the first day of my 30-day shift didn't start with confidence or glow-ups or affirmations in the mirror. It started with a brutal, private decision to stop auditioning for spaces that were never meant to hold me, to stop over-explaining my worth, to stop arriving early emotionally and leaving late energetically. Because psychology is very clear on this, even if dating culture pretends it's not. Value is assigned, not requested. And the moment I stopped asking to be seen and started behaving like visibility was the default, people followed suit, not because they are malicious or shallow, but because humans take cues. And if you signal that access to you is unlimited, attention becomes lazy, desire becomes diluted, and respect quietly evaporates. But when you move through the world with an unspoken assumption of importance, something ancient wakes up in others, a recalibration instinct. And suddenly, you're not chasing interest. You're curating it. And yes, this showed up in my relationships almost immediately. Because the men who once responded inconsistently became focused. The ones who liked me became attentive. And the ones who couldn't meet me at that level simply faded without drama. Which is the most underrated luxury of feminine power effortlessness, without apology. And if you're listening to this and feeling a tightness in your chest, good. That's recognition, not fear. And before you even realize it, you're already stepping into the version of yourself who doesn't negotiate her standards in silence anymore. And if this is landing for you, I want you to hit subscribe and turn on notifications now. Not as a favor to me, but as a promise to yourself that you're done consuming content that entertains you instead of elevating you. By the second week, something even more interesting happened. And this is where philosophy quietly entered the room. Because when you stop performing for approval, you're forced to confront who you actually are without an audience. And that's where most people panic and run back to noise. But I stayed, and I noticed how much of my energy had been trained outward. Monitoring reactions, softening edges, adjusting tone, shrinking brilliance to be digestible. And I remembered a line by Simone de Beauvoir that hit differently this time, not because it was poetic, but because it was precise. That femininity is often treated as something one becomes in relation to others rather than something one claims for oneself. And I decided I was done being relationally defined. So I began practicing something deceptively small and dangerously powerful. Delayed availability. Not as a tactic, but as a lifestyle. Answering when it felt aligned instead of immediate. Committing when it felt expansive instead of obligatory. Letting silence exist without rushing to fill it. And here's the psychological truth most dating advice avoids, because it can't be packaged neat. Mystery isn't created by hiding. It's created by self-containment. And when your emotional life becomes rich enough that you're no longer spilling it everywhere, people lean in, not because you're withholding, but because you're full. And this bled into everything. My posture shifted. My voice slowed. My choices became cleaner. And suddenly luxury wasn't just something I wore. It was something I embodied. The way I ordered coffee, the the way I declined invitations, the way I exited conversations that no longer fed me. And men noticed this before they noticed my outfits or my face. Because dominance, when feminine, is subtle. It doesn't push, it pulls. And the relationships that survived this recalibration became deeper, more intentional, more reverent, while the ones built on convenience or access fell apart without confrontation, which is exactly how you know you're doing it right. Because power doesn't argue, it rearranges. And if you're feeling this shift in your body right now, I want you to comment the word ready below. Not for me, but to mark the moment you stopped consuming and started choosing. By day 30, invisibility wasn't even a memory anymore. It was a myth I once believed. Because what completed the transformation wasn't attention. It was authorship, the internal decision to become the main character in my own life, rather than a supporting role in someone else's narrative. And this is where motivation stops being loud and starts being lethal. Because when you know who you are, you don't need to convince. You don't need to compete. You don't need to chase chemistry that doesn't chase you back. And the world responds to this with a kind of inevitability. Invitations increase. Respect sharpens. Desire deepens. Not because you're perfect, but because you're anchored. And anchoring is magnetic. And the final lesson I'll leave you with is this. The reason those 30 days worked wasn't discipline. It was devotion. Devotion to my standards, my rhythms, my intuition, my pleasure, my future self. And if you take nothing else from this, take this: visibility is not about being loud. It's about being undeniable. And you don't become undeniable by adding more to yourself. You become undeniable by removing everything that isn't aligned with your truth. So if this video felt like it was speaking directly to you, that's not coincidence. That's readiness. And I want you to rewatch this. Let it sink in. Share it with the woman you're becoming. And remember this moment. Because this is where invisibility ends and authorship begins. And once you cross that line, there is no going back. Only forward. Only upward. Only deeper into the woman who no longer waits to be chosen because she finally chose herself. And let me deepen this for you. Because once you step into this state, the temptation is to romanticize it instead of stabilizing it. And queens don't survive on inspiration alone. They survive on integration. So I need you to understand that the after effect of becoming impossible to ignore is not applause. It's responsibility. The responsibility to no longer abandon yourself for comfort, chemistry, or chaos disguised as passion. Because when your nervous system finally calibrates to peace, anything inconsistent will feel loud, immature, even unattractive. And this is where many women self-sabotage by mistaking boredom for misalignment, when in reality boredom is just the absence of emotional addiction. And I noticed this in myself when I stopped craving intensity and started craving consistency. When eye contact meant more than grand gestures, when calm felt erotic, when being chosen daily mattered more than being chased temporarily. And philosophically, this is where power lives. Because Aristotle said excellence is not an act but a habit. And feminine excellence is not about being adored once. It's about being respected always, especially in your absence. And the world responds differently to women who don't emotionally disappear when they are not validated. Women who don't spiral when attention dips. Women who don't confuse longing with love. Because these women are sovereign. And sovereignty is intoxicating. It makes men pause. It makes women watch. It makes opportunities circle back when you least expect them. Not because you're manipulating reality, but because you're finally aligned with it. And if you're feeling a quiet certainty replacing your old urgency right now, that's the signal you're crossing over. So stay here. Keep choosing depth over drama, authorship over approval, self-trust over explanation, and don't rush the becoming. Because the most dangerous thing you can do after you become visible is forget why you were invisible in the first place. And if this spoke to you in a way nothing else has, you already know what to do. Stay connected. Turn on notifications. Leave your takeaway below. And remember, the woman you're becoming is not waiting for permission. She's waiting for consistency. And that's a promise you can keep starting today.